What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, Showtime president of sports, Stephen Espinoza, gives an update on the highly anticipated Undisputed showdown between undefeated, unified, three-belt welterweight world champion who holds the IBF, the WBC, the WBA, welterweight world title, superstar boxer, who is widely considered by many to be top two, if not the number one best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and ERROL the Truth Spence Jr., 28 wins, no losses, no draws, 22 wins by way of knockout, 32 years of age, 5'9.5" with a 72-inch arm reach. And his biggest rival, undefeated three-division world champion, former junior welterweight undisputed world champion, currently the reigning WBO, World Boxing Organization, welterweight world champion, who is widely considered by many to be the number one best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford is 38 wins, no losses, no draw, 29 big wins by way of knockout. He is 34 years of age, 5'8" with a 74-inch arm reach. With that said, this makes for the biggest fight in the sport of boxing. I can't reiterate that enough. But in this case, obviously, Stephen Espinoza, he made it clear that, you know, the issue is obviously money, right? Splits. So Stephen Espinoza, he states that, you know, it came to the point where he feels like everybody needs to be locked in the room and not let out until they come to an agreement and get the fight announced and signed, sealed, and ready to be delivered. This is what Stephen Espinoza, he had to say, right? And then Stephen Espinoza was asked, what about the fight taking place, you know, overseas, you know, because we see a lot of fights now taking place overseas, you know, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, things of that nature, and they're giving out big site fees, which in return, you know, helps pay the guaranteed purses for the fights. And Stephen Espinoza, he weighed in on this, and Stephen Espinoza, he said that would be all well and dandy. The problem with that is that time, okay? It boils down to time, right? In which, you know, the fighters and the fight of this magnitude, you know, you want this fight to be, you know, on prime time, right? You want it to be, you know, at a certain time because of the magnitude of the fight, and both of these fighters are American fighters, so you want the fight itself, you know, to be, you know, at a reasonable time here in the States, okay? You don't want the time in the States, you know, to be, you know, off time, right? So he stated that you don't want the time to be, you know, a time like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or resulting in, you know, 2 in the morning in the UK, right? So, I mean in Saudi Arabia or wherever, you know, the site fee is, you know. So the problem is you want to have this fight, you know, you want to have this fight at a specific time, okay? And you don't want to have the, you know, it loses luster. He said this fight deserves to be in the United States. This is a fight that, you know, fans deserve to see here in the United States, you know, and so, you know, the time, you know, is very important, okay? You know, and so he stated that, you know, that's a big issue, you know, to give something you have to give, right? You know, to get something you have to give something. And so to get the site fee and the big money that they're, you know, that they will be willing to put out, you know, $30 million, $40 million, you know, that, you know, the problem is they're going to want, you can't tell them, you know, what time the fight should be on, right? And here in the States, clearly, you know, for them, they're going to want the fight. See, you have these fights like, for instance, you know, we had the Anthony Joshua, Oleksandr Usyk fight, right? It came on here in the States at 5 o'clock. Okay, that's an off time, as Stephen Espinoza, you know, Stephen Espinoza stated, right? And so, you know, and that's a huge problem, right? The fight itself, you know, it makes sense where you can get a deal done, where you can have, the fighters' purses guaranteed, paid up front, like Anthony Joshua, Alexander Usyk, Anthony Joshua, Andy Ruiz, and big fights, right? They're paying big money, and so Stephen Espinoza, he clarifies and he says that would be a good idea, but the problem is the time, and you got to look at it from this standpoint. Anthony Joshua is a United Kingdom Olympic gold medalist fighter. Alexander Usyk is an Olympic gold medalist Ukrainian fighter. Okay. Now, Anthony Joshua was still although he had lost June 1st, 2019 to Andy Ruiz Jr. at Madison Square Garden, getting dropped 4 times and ultimately stopped in the 7th round. Although he lost that fight, he still was the bigger name. He still was the bigger brand. And so because he was the bigger name and still was the bigger brand, he still was the A side, and he was still the bigger draw. And so that fight took place in Saudi Arabia. They built an arena and everything for that rematch, which took place December of 2019. Andy Ruiz, he didn't want to go. Okay, Andy Ruiz was not willing to go to Saudi Arabia. He just didn't have a choice, right? Because they had a rematch clause. And because they had the rematch clause, Andy Ruiz, again, he wasn't eager to go to Saudi Arabia, but he didn't have a choice. So although he was an American fighter, he didn't have a choice to go over there. And still, Anthony Joshua was the bigger name, bigger brand, bigger draw, and he's a UK fighter. So hence the reason why the fight took place in the UK. In Saudi Arabia, and it didn't disturb the time zone, right? Just like Usyk and Anthony Joshua, it didn't disturb the time zone. Most recently, we had Floyd Mayweather. He fought in exhibition style, but a fight of this magnitude, when you have 2 American fighters at the height of their careers, at the height of their game, considered both top, 3, top 5 for sure, pound for pound best fighters in the world, and one is born in New York and raised in Dallas, Texas, and the other one is born in America and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. And then you take those fighters overseas, that's, if it was still prime time, if the fight still happened at, 10 o'clock here in the States, I think it would be more than doable, right? But the time, if a fight of this magnitude happens at 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that's a problem, okay? And it can't happen over there with their site fee, like Stephen Espinoza says, and then we dictate the time and tell them, listen, we want to have it at 10 o'clock in the States, which results to it being 3 o'clock in the morning in Saudi Arabia. You understand? Because now it dwindles their opportunity to recoup their money. You understand? And with that said, it would be, we saw big fights like Muhammad Ali and George Foreman take place in Africa, right? And there's a time difference, major time zone difference, and it was still massive, and it did massive amounts of views, but it wasn't pay-per-view. Not to the pay-per-view format that it is today's time. You understand? And so it hinders the pay-per-views, but again, it won't matter because they're getting the site fees, this guaranteed purses up front. I think it personally could be a good idea if they could find out a way to deal with the time, right? If they can come up with an agreement and a common ground to the time. Maybe it's 1 o'clock over there, and maybe it's 6 o'clock here, or 7 o'clock here. Maybe that will be doable, right? Because you know, I don't know how Steven Espinoza recoups his pay-per-views for Showtime, you know, how that works, but the guaranteed purse seems to be the issue. So Steven Espinoza, he had this to say.
This has nothing to do with Showtime, but when you think of Eddie Hearn and DAZN, you know, these guys are putting fights on overseas or in the Middle East, getting $20 to $40 million site fees. Do you feel that?
And shouts out to All Access Elite Boxing for this interview. Shouts out, go subscribe and support All Access Elite Boxing interview.
If, like, let's just say if boxing were to come together, the boxing gods and the promoters and everybody were to come together and say, you know what, man, boxing needs this fight, do you think that that's more or less will kind of minimize as far as what it is that they're asking for? If you guys are able to get a site fee of 20, 30, 40 million dollars, and if somebody overseas is going to be willing to pay that, I mean, do you think that would potentially...
See, here's so Steven Espinoza is going to break down and give his thoughts on the site fees. And again, shouts out to All Access Elite Boxing Media.
Get it, make it happen.
It helps. You know, one of the issues, you know, particularly with whether it's Dubai or Saudi Arabia or any of those places, is if they're going to pay $30 or $40 million, they're going to want it on their local time. Yeah, you know, no one's going to pay a premium fee and then say, hey, you got to go at 4 in the afternoon, you know, or 2 in the morning, you know, whatever the time is. So the way it works out in Saudi Arabia and Dubai in particular, you know, if they want it in their prime time, that's going to be in the afternoon here. And then the question is it better for that fight to happen on an off time at a point where the U.S. fans don't have access to go? Or, you know, should we hold out and try to make it where the U.S. fans can sort of enjoy what I think should be a fight here in the U.S.
Yes.
At a time when it's going to get the biggest audience? So, look, there's no easy answer. You know, it's sort of a toss-up. You know, would you rather the fight happen, even if it's not on the ideal conditions? You know, maybe so. But I think in an ideal world, we'd get to the point, you know, and maybe we just have to grind through the deal and lock everybody in a room and force them to come to agreement and say, look, this is what it's going to take, and you're not coming out of the room until we have a deal.
So you heard it. That's what Steven Espinoza had to say. Well, we just want to see this big fight. Hopefully it just comes to fruition and they find a way to get it done. And that's all I got for y'all. Make sure you hit the like button. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon to get all the new notifications. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shout out to the entire LDBC. Shout out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share these videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.